We are so close! The Starship Flight 5 countdown begins as teams race to finish the remaining work. SpaceX just finished stacking its first Block 2 Starship, only the final segment is missing something. We figured out for you what SpaceX will use its new Can Crusher 2.0 for, and we know if Starliner will fly back with or without its crew. Does it have something to do with the Discovery Channel? My name is Felix, welcome to What About It, let's dive right in. Starship updates. Work is in full swing at Starbase as teams prepare for the next launch of the world's most powerful rocket in just a couple of days. Thanks to a post by SpaceX, we know that the hardware for Flight 5 is ready. Booster 12 and Ship 30 are prepped and ready to launch. But what about the ground hardware? In the last episode we discussed how SpaceX's teams had performed repairs on Tower A's ship Quick Disconnect, which provides fuel and power to the upper stage before launch. The rest of the ground infrastructure has also seen massive amounts of work since this X-post. We also saw even more work being done around the chopstick catch arms and the launch mount. They received substantial structural integrity improvements to be able to withstand a catch attempt better. It's possible that most of the launch mount work consisted of checking to ensure that there wasn't any unexpected damage during the recent slap test. And speaking of those slap tests, that brings us up to the chopsticks. These are crucial pieces of hardware for the upcoming flight test, as they are used not only to stack the ship and booster onto the launch mount as we've seen so far. Now they're also used as the booster's landing pad. Are you sure? This will be done by performing a maneuver similar to SpaceX's Falcon 9 landings. However, once the booster gets close to the launch pad, instead of deploying landing legs, it'll be caught out of mid-air by the gigantic metal chopstick arms. This is done because having landing legs big enough to support the weight of the world's largest rocket stage and absorb any shock upon landing would add a lot of extra weight to the booster and reduce the payload capacity. Why add legs if it never lands on rough terrain? But a maneuver like this has never been attempted, therefore SpaceX wants to ensure they are as prepared as possible. Because of this, SpaceX has performed many tests, including the previously mentioned slap on the test tank 14.1, designed to verify the booster and ground hardware for this crazy maneuver. SpaceX just finished its most recent round of testing on the test tank, and now teams can be seen checking the chopsticks for damage and making improvements based on the data from the tests. Some of these improvements include adding reinforcements to some of the weld lines on the chopsticks and replacing the cushions that reduce the force applied to the booster upon catch. These are just some of the upgrades we were able to spot. An even better wording would be that we spotted the absence of something. It appears SpaceX has removed one of the supports used on the chopsticks. This support may have been damaged during testing and needed a replacement, or SpaceX will upgrade it. Either way, we'll likely see SpaceX remove the one on the other chopstick before Flight 5 as well. It's fascinating to see SpaceX upgrade the catch arms so much. All they used them for until now was stacking work. Now they find out how they need to be built to accomplish a catch. Fingers crossed for the upcoming launch. Let's move over to our second tower at Starbase because it's finally a full tower. The last module was stacked just a few days ago. We talked about it in the last episode, but with the tower now fully stacked and us having done another helicopter flyover, it's the perfect time to talk about SpaceX's work on the tower's internals. After all, this tower still needs quite a bit of work to be completed before it is operational. This includes finishing the internal piping and electrical wiring inside the tower, which will carry fuel, data and electricity to the ship. Fortunately, SpaceX decided to pre-install most of the hardware for this on the ground, so all that's left is to connect all the internals between the modules and flesh it out. The other things still missing from the tower are the chopsticks, their hydraulics and the SQD. Both chopsticks and the carriage that attaches them to the tower, allowing them to move up and down, are in storage at the Sanchez site just down the road, ready to be rolled. These will likely be rolling over to the pad in the next couple of weeks to be attached to the tower. However, the ship Quick Disconnect is a different story. We are still waiting to see any hardware of it, which is a bit surprising considering its size. After all, it's a big and important piece. It's possible that the SQD is stored somewhere under a cover, preventing us from seeing it even from above. However, it's more likely that SpaceX has upgraded the design to make it more resilient to launches than the first one. The original version of Tower A requires significant repairs after each launch. You can't just launch a rocket with a tower though, you need a pad as well, and we're finally starting to see work being completed on the new launch mount. But before I tell you about that, we've looked into our channel metrics and there are over 2 million returning monthly viewers who have not subscribed yet. Help us improve the channel even further by double checking that you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our updates. And while you're at it, give us a like and become a Why supporter. Why? Because you'll gain access to a massive amount of extra content. With it, you get access to daily new Starbase photo galleries, including all those we've posted so far. Satellite, aerial and ground photos, more than 400 posts in the past 2 years alone, with up to 7 picture galleries per week. Insights, chats with me, you name it. Thanks to our Redline Heli Tours flyover, we can see that teams are finally beginning more foundation work, starting with these steel plates. But why would SpaceX want to put steel plates on the ground? The first thing that comes to mind is support. After all, much of Starbase is just sand and mud, so adding support beams is something that SpaceX does. Except they have already added most of the support beams. There must be a different reason then. Hear me out. These steel plates serve as protection, but I don't mean protection from a rocket launch. I mean protection from water. These barriers allow SpaceX to dig down without worrying about the water table, which is only about a foot below the ground. Yup, if you shovel a hole down there that is a foot deep, it'll fill with water. Try building the largest rocket launch pads in the world on that. We saw SpaceX do something similar at Massey's when they were building their flame trench, meaning SpaceX will likely dig out this area before adding a flame diverter and building the launch mount. Hopefully SpaceX will be able to do this quickly, because I am super interested in seeing what the final design for this will look like. SpaceX uses certain processes in the same way every time. We do the same here at Why. Today I want to show you how I work. Being a content creator is not just about looking cool in a video, it's more like being a writer and researcher. All of what I just said about the space industry needs to be researched. Guess what the #1 software is that I use for this? It's actually my web browser, Opera. Here are 3 quick examples why I love Opera. I like Aria. It's Opera's built-in AI. It enables me to quickly summarize anything by just marking it directly on a website. Extremely nice if you want to research something quickly. I like pop-out videos. Such a normal thing on the phone, so rare on a PC. I can read, write and watch at the same time. Huge time saver. Last but not least, I love tab islands. See this? That's a lot of tabs, but all are grouped, sorted and easily accessible. Problem solved. Opera does more than most other browsers. How about a free ad blocker? It has an integrated music player, support for messengers, you name it, all built in. If you want to love your browser as well, click the link in the pinned comment or in the description and download today's sponsor, Opera. Give it a shot and report back to me how you liked it. You also gotta love SpaceX's speed. Thanks to their progress, we can narrow the pad design down just a bit. Because they added these walls. The flame diverter will likely be partly underground and run parallel to the launch tower. The only question now is whether they will point off to one side, similar to the static fire stand at Massey's, meaning SpaceX would already have experience with a similar design, or towards both sides, similar to the diverter used with the Saturn V moon rocket. Which do you think SpaceX will choose? Leave your comments below and let's see who can get it right. We're able to see and learn all these things because we're able to get a bird's eye view. Did you know you can take a helicopter ride over Starbase and get the same views as in our videos? Visit redlineheli.com/Felix to book your helicopter ride over Starbase with $25 off. Give it a try, it is unforgettable. Moving over to the build side now, SpaceX teams have been hard at work on everything but Flight 5's hardware. As for once, we don't see any work being done on either the booster or the ship for the upcoming flight. That's a great sign, they are simply done. But of course, there is more flight hardware than just that of Flight 5 at the build site. Ship 31, which is expected to be the ship for Flight 6, has been seeing a lot of work, especially around its heat shield. Teams have continued working to replace the old heat tiles with the newer, stronger ones and add the secondary ablative layer beneath. Upgrades! However, instead of losing tiles, Ship 31 began gaining them again. I wish that would happen with me. This is surprising, as when Ship 30 had its heat shield upgraded, SpaceX removed nearly all the tiles before they began adding them back. This time, SpaceX decided to do things a bit differently. Remember how I pointed out the slow progress in the last episode? Over the past couple of weeks, we saw teams removing tiles near the tip of the nose cone and the weld seams between the barrel sections. SpaceX's Starship upper and lower stages are made from separate sections, also called barrel sections. We believe SpaceX started with these because unlike the rest of the tiles, which are attached with pins welded directly to the body, these sections are glued on. Makes them hard to remove. It's interesting to see that SpaceX has begun adding these tiles back already, and there could be a few possible reasons for that. One could be that they had problems installing all the tiles back at once on the previous ship, so they decided to change the method a bit. The other possibility is a tile shortage. Again, no similarities. These new version 2 tiles, which are differently made and double the strength, only got designed recently, and SpaceX likely needed to work many things out before starting mass production. So SpaceX may have a shortage of tiles with pin mounts. This may explain another odd occurrence that was just spotted at Starbase. To see what that is, we'll have to move on from Ship 31 to its youngest sibling and the first of the next generation starships, Ship 33. We've watched this ship fly up since its first section was rolled into Megabay 2 on July 24th. High-speed hull assembly. 1 month almost to the day later, SpaceX has already finished it in record time. The engine section, the final section of the process, was rolled from the Star Factory to Megabay 2, where it was attached to the rest of the ship and lifted onto the weld stand. So we have it, the first fully stacked Block 2 Starship. The only things missing now are a bit of internal work, the aft flaps on the bottom of the ship, and a few tiles. Actually, quite a few tiles. This finally brings me to why I think SpaceX might have a tile shortage. For Ship 33, all previously stacked segments almost had a complete heat shield, with the only missing tiles being along the weld lines between the segments. Until this engine section, because it's missing nearly all of them. Interestingly, it still has all of the pins to attach the tiles. SpaceX may simply not have enough tiles to attach to this aft section, but they still wanted to stack it. SpaceX's choice to stack this segment without tiles could still have another reason, but the shortage seems plausible to me. I'd love to know your thoughts. Why do you think SpaceX has avoided pinned tiles on ships 31 and 33? Let me know in the comments. Ship 33 is almost a complete overhaul, with likely thousands of upgrades, big and small, compared to previous versions. A massive step forward, but all of those changes needed to be designed. Where's all that happening? Let's look at how the place where future designs will be made is coming along, the office building. Thanks to our flyover, we can see that this building has undergone a massive amount of work. In just a few weeks, SpaceX has built almost the entire support structure for the connector between the office building and the Star Factory. We can also see that the office building has received nearly all its external glass, with only the top row remaining. Looking over a bit, we can see the plot of land that SpaceX recently acquired from a local who trolled them for 3 years straight is already in use, acting as storage for pieces of the office connector. Hopefully soon engineers will be able to use this space to design things like the lunar starship and possibly the first ships to go to Mars. Starbase has a bright future. SpaceX is making the world's most advanced rocket, but they can't do everything on paper. When a new design is created or an old one is changed, it needs to be tested. Verification. That's why SpaceX has invested so much time in the infrastructure at Massey's test site, which SpaceX uses to test ideas and designs and determine whether they are actually improvements or the wrong path to a multiplanetary future. Developing something new like a starship is like navigating a labyrinth for the engineers. There are many wrong paths and only 1 or 2 leading to success. That is why these test articles are also called pathfinders. They find the path. Recently, SpaceX used Massey's to perform a cryogenic proof test on a new pathfinder called Test Tank 16. It's likely being used to verify the design for the Block 2 Starship upper stage and boosters. After being filled with cryogenic liquids to ensure it could hold the pressure, it was rolled back to the production yard where teams inspected it. And now it's been rolled back to Massey's because it's time for some structural tests, or can crushing as we call it. Once it arrived at Massey's, it was lifted into SpaceX's new Can Crusher 2.0, and unlike last time when it was cryo-tested in there, this time it had the lid lifted on top and pistons attached. This can crusher has yet to crush any cans. Test Tank 16 has the honor of being its first victim. Over the past few months, this can crusher has been a mystery as we watched SpaceX build some sort of cage around it. Currently, this cage is 3 rings tall, with a 4th ring on the ground and likely a 5th to come later. SpaceX only needs the first 2 rings to test this smaller Pathfinder. Now we can finally understand why SpaceX built this. Check this out. Unlike when the can crusher lid was used on the previous can crusher, it now has hydraulic pistons directly attached to it. These fit perfectly into mounts that are on the upright beams. Having these pistons up here allows SpaceX to simulate horizontal forces that a ship or booster might experience, for example on re-entry or during high winds. These forces may be less than those experienced vertically upon launch, but because of the direction of the forces, they are still very significant and could pose a risk. It's pretty simple. If you want to break a stick, you shouldn't try to squish it in from top to bottom, right? You'd of course break it along the long side. On previous flights, especially the first one, both ship and booster proved remarkably resilient to various forces, including those involved in a cartwheel. Top scores! These spins were not intentional, but they showed how much headroom SpaceX has on structural integrity. However, SpaceX wants to reduce the weight of the flight hardware to increase the payload, right? This can be achieved by removing unnecessary reinforcements, for example. On a perfect flight, it doesn't need to withstand cartwheels even if it's fun to watch. Aerobatics is not the goal here. However, reducing these structural components risks lowering the structure too much, so testing is highly important. In other words, the goal is to shave as much material off the rocket as possible without it exploding. Rocket engineering, not science. I'm sorry, science people. Finally, there is no real news on a possible launch date for Flight 5 yet. SpaceX is ready and they are waiting for the FAA. We'll update you as soon as there is any news. Let's now look at one of SpaceX's other endeavors, Polaris Dawn. We discussed this mission quite a bit in previous episodes. Still, for those who are unfamiliar, Polaris Dawn is the second fully commercial Crew Dragon flight funded and led by billionaire Jared Isaacman. The first of these missions was Inspiration 4, which flew back in September 2021. After Inspiration 4, Isaacman wanted more and decided to help SpaceX with 3 more flights. The Polaris program was born. Cool, so we've got another commercial flight in space. But this isn't just any commercial flight. Polaris Dawn also plans on being the first commercial spacewalk using SpaceX's own extravehicular suit for the first time. A major step beyond just rocket design, SpaceX is quietly acquiring all the knowledge needed for its own astronaut corps. It's developing its own crewed flight department separate from NASA. The EVA should happen any day now. I can guarantee we'll cover it right here if and when it does happen. Subscribe to get notified. Additionally, Polaris Dawn will travel the furthest any human has flown since Apollo 17 in 1972 and will conduct many medical and health studies in orbit and during the EVA. There is a lot to look forward to with this mission. Best of luck to Isaacman and the crew. You got this, Rook. SpaceX's Dragon capsule has revolutionized the space industry and human spaceflight. Having flown 14 times, including Polaris Dawn safely carrying 54 people to orbit, Crew Dragon has shown its capabilities. But soon, Crew Dragon will add another accomplishment to its belt, bringing back more people than it brought up. But how can that be possible? I mean, are they multiplying up there? Wait, what is this exactly about? We've arrived at the hook, everyone. This has nothing to do with the Discovery Channel, if you get what I mean. It's possible because SpaceX will be bringing down Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams from the International Space Station after they were flown up on Boeing's Starliner. That means the troublemaker will be returning to Earth without a crew because on the 24th, NASA announced that they believe the crew capsule is outside their safety margins for trusting it to bring the crew back to Earth. Good call. Over the past few months, Starliner's situation has become quite a big story after its first crewed launch, which encountered massive complications. 5 of its thrusters went out during docking and multiple helium leaks were detected. This caused NASA to extend the initial planned mission from a few days to a few weeks and then a few months before finally deciding that Starliner was unfit to bring back the crew it had brought up. It is important to point out, however, that NASA's safety margins are very slim. They require only a 1 in 270 chance of critical failure during a flight. This means that if Starliner had a 1 in 269 chance of failure, NASA would not allow its astronauts to fly on it. The biggest problem was that Boeing's engineers couldn't figure it out either. The exact cause of these failures is still unknown. This means it would also have been difficult for NASA to properly determine the risks associated with the craft, which explains its decision to bring the astronauts back on SpaceX's Crew Dragon. Butch and Sunny will stay on the station for over 6 more months before flying back with Crew 9. This is not a good look for Boeing, which has not exactly had the best few years. Looking just at its space division, Boeing is looking for a buyer for ULA, of which they currently own half. The SLS Moon rocket is extremely over budget and behind schedule, according to a new report from the Office of Inspector General. While tracking the development of the Block 1B version of SLS, the report found that Boeing's lack of experience caused the situation. And now Starliner, which has likely lost Boeing billions of dollars at this point and caused extreme amounts of reputational damage, will have its crew rescued by its competitor's capsule. This is not exactly what we'd like to see. NASA sees it the same way. On top, Crew 9 will have to fly with 2 astronauts less than initially planned. Boeing used to be at the cutting edge of aerospace on Earth, in orbit and even beyond. Its rockets brought us to the moon and won the US the space race. We can only hope that this trend Boeing has been going on over the past decade or so can be reversed, and that this once beacon of innovation can regain the trust of not only NASA but the public as well. Otherwise, Starliner might actually end up on the Discovery Channel, just not as a success story. That's it for today. Remember to smash that like button, subscribe for more awesome content. This is what fuels the algorithm and it does help us immensely. Check out our epic shirts in your favorite Space Nerd store. A link is in the description. And if you want to train your space IQ even further, watch this video next to continue your journey. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you again in the next episode. SpaceX's choice to statch the stitchy stup. Cold hold. Yeah, it cold hold the cold liquid. Extra vehicle. Not notified. What's the algorithm?